Through a sunlit forest, a curious fox with a fluffy tail and bright, glimmering eyes darted between the trees, its tiny paws leaving soft imprints on the mossy ground. Pausing to sniff a patch of wildflowers, it tilted its head, listening to the distant chirp of a bird, as if the entire forest were a melody it alone could understand. For 17 long years, Amandi and Rafat had shared a life filled with love, kindness, and unwavering devotion to one another. Their home was a place of warmth and generosity, known throughout the village as a refuge of goodwill. Yet, beneath their smiles and the affection they showed each other, a deep sorrow lingered, a pain that only grew heavier with each passing year. Despite their happiness together, they had never been blessed with a child. Every time a newborn entered the village, Rafat would be among the first to visit, showering the baby with gifts, whispering blessings over them, and holding them just a little longer than necessary. But no matter how many infants she cradled, none could fill the empty space in her heart. Every naming ceremony was both a joyous occasion and a painful reminder of what she lacked. And every time she returned home from one, she would retreat to her room, close the door, and weep in silence. She had prayed to the gods countless times, kneeling on the cool, packed earth of their hut, whispering her pleas into the night. "Please, gods of our land," she would beg, her voice trembling. "I do not care if the child is blind, if they cannot walk, if they come to me weak or imperfect. All I ask is to be a mother, to know the sound of my own child's laughter filling this house." One afternoon, after yet another fruitless visit to a healer, Rafat walked alone through the forest on her way to the farm. The weight of her sorrow felt heavier than the basket she carried on her head. The wind rustled the leaves above, but all she could hear was the emptiness inside her. Hot tears rolled down her cheeks, mixing with the dust that clung to her skin. And there, among the towering trees, she let her sorrow spill out. "Almighty gods!" she cried, her voice breaking. "Why have you forsaken me? Am I cursed? What have I done to deserve this endless longing while others rejoice in their children's laughter? Even if you bless me with just one child, no matter how different they may be, I will cherish them. Please, hear my plea." The forest fell silent, as if the very trees were listening. And then, carried on the wind like a whisper from another world, came a voice soft yet powerful, ancient yet filled with warmth. "Fear not, daughter of the land," it murmured. "Your prayers have been heard. Soon you will carry life within you. In just a few short weeks, you shall conceive and give birth to twin sons. One shall rise to greatness, while the other will walk a different path. But heed this warning. While they shall be born with locks of hair that must never be cut, defy this, and disaster shall follow." Rafat gasped, her heart pounding. Was this truly happening? Had the gods at last answered her cries? Trembling, she turned and ran, eager to tell Amandi of the divine message she had received. But when she reached home and recounted what had happened, Amandi shook his head. "My love," he said gently, taking her hands in his, "I know how deeply you desire a child, but do not let your longing make you see illusions. Surely someone has played a trick on you." But no matter how much doubt his words planted in her heart, Rafat could not shake the feeling that the voice she had heard was real, that something beyond this world had spoken to her. So she clung to hope, praying that soon, the promise of the gods would come true. Several weeks passed, and just as the mysterious voice had promised, Rafat found herself with child. At first, she hardly dared to believe it. But as the days turned into weeks, and the signs became undeniable, joy blossomed in her heart like the first rains after a long drought. She and Amandi held each other close, their hearts overflowing with gratitude and anticipation. Months later, the village was alive with celebration when Rafat finally gave birth not to one child, but two. Twin boys, identical yet distinct, each bearing thick locks of hair that cascaded down their tiny heads like woven silk. They named the elder Obi and the younger Chuka. The villagers gathered around to see the long-awaited children, whispering in awe about their unusual hair and the prophecy that had preceded their birth. Some elders nodded knowingly, sensing that these boys were destined for something far greater than an ordinary life. From the very beginning, the twins were inseparable. They grew up playing in the dusty village paths, their laughter echoing through the air like a song. But even in their earliest years, their differences began to show. Obi was bold, curious, and brimming with an energy that could not be contained. He was the first to run toward danger, the first to climb the tallest tree, the first to defend the weak. Chuka, on the other hand, was quieter, more reserved. He watched, observed, and measured his words carefully. One fateful afternoon, when the boys were 5 years old, their family's life changed forever. It was a warm, golden day, and Obi and Chuka were playing outside while their father, Amandi, worked nearby. Suddenly, a rustling in the bushes caught their attention. A deadly snake, its sleek body coiled and ready to strike, had slithered dangerously close to Amandi, who was too focused on his work to notice. In the blink of an eye, Obi sprang into action. Without hesitation, he lunged forward, his small hands quick and sure. In one swift motion, he grabbed the serpent just behind its head and flung it away, its hissing form disappearing into the brush. Amandi turned, his breath catching in his throat as he realized what had just happened. His son, only 5 years old, had just saved his life. His hands trembled as he called out for Rafat, urgency lacing his voice. Rafat came running, panic flashing across her face until she saw Obi standing there, his chest puffed out with pride, the remnants of the snake's struggle still in his grip. She gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. "Do you remember the voice?" she whispered to Amandi, her eyes wide with realization. "The one that spoke to me before they were born? Could Obi be the child of greatness it spoke of?" That night, the family celebrated Obi's bravery with a feast, their home filled with laughter and warmth. But as the villagers praised Obi, Chuka sat quietly in the corner, his hands clenched at his sides. While his brother was being hailed as a hero, a seed of something dark took root in his heart, something that would one day change everything. As the years passed, the bond between Obi and Chuka remained strong, but an unspoken tension began to grow between them. While they were still brothers playing, laughing, and learning side by side, it became clear to everyone in the village that Obi was different. He had a presence, a light about him that drew people in. Wherever he went, villagers greeted him with admiration, showering him with praise for his bravery, his kindness, his strength. Chuka, on the other hand, often felt like he was standing in Obi's shadow. It wasn't that people ignored him. He was loved, respected, and cared for, but the attention, the whispers of prophecy, the way their parents' eyes lit up whenever Obi did something remarkable. It was always about him. At first, Chuka tried to push these feelings away. He told himself it didn't matter. But as time went on, those small, bitter thoughts began to take root deep in his heart. It wasn't just the villagers who favored Obi, it was their parents too. Whenever Amandi or Rafat made a decision, they always seemed to look to Obi first. If there was a task to be done, they trusted Obi to handle it. If someone in the village needed help, they sent Obi. When they spoke of the future, their words were always filled with hope for Obi's destiny, for what he would become. And Chuka? He was there, always second, always the other son. One evening, after returning from the farm, Chuka stood in front of their small hut, watching as their parents fussed over Obi, praising him for another good deed he had done that day. A familiar knot tightened in Chuka's chest. He clenched his fists and looked down at the long dreadlocks that had adorned his head since birth. They were heavy, hot, always getting in his way. And more than that, they were a symbol, one that tied him to a prophecy he wasn't even sure he believed in. "I don't want these anymore," Chuka muttered under his breath. The thought consumed him for days. He convinced himself that maybe, just maybe, if he cut them off, things would change. He could be his own person, separate from Obi, free from the expectations and whispers of destiny that had followed them since birth. Finally, he made his decision. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, he approached Amandi. "Father, I want to cut my hair," Chuka said firmly. Amandi hesitated. The words of the mysterious voice from years ago echoed in his mind. But then, he remembered something else the voice had said: they must not hesitate if the boys ever wished to cut their hair. So, without questioning further, he fetched a pair of scissors. With each snip, Chuka felt lighter. He smiled to himself, believing that this was his moment, that from now on, things would be different. But what he didn't know, what no one knew, was that his choice had set something in motion, something that could not be undone. At first, nothing seemed different after Chuka cut his hair. The village carried on as it always had, and life continued in its steady rhythm. But beneath the surface, something had shifted. It started subtly, an uneasiness in the air, a feeling of tension that no one could quite place. The animals in the forest seemed more restless, the nights darker, the winds harsher. The elders, wise and attuned to the spirits of the land, sensed it before anyone else. Then, one morning, tragedy struck. A hunter, well known and respected in the village, set out into the wilderness as he did every day, hoping to bring home food for his family. But as the sun set and the sky darkened, he did not return. His wife, pacing anxiously outside their hut, felt a growing dread settle in her chest. By nightfall, she could bear it no longer. With a racing heart, she went to the king, pleading for help. "My husband should have returned by now," she said, her voice shaking. "Something is wrong. Please send someone to find him." The king, though troubled, remained calm. He gathered a team of the village's strongest hunters and sent them deep into the forest to search for their missing brother. They moved carefully, torches in hand, whispering prayers to the gods for protection. Hours passed before they stumbled upon a horrifying scene. The hunter lay motionless on the ground, his body torn and bloodied. Standing over him, its powerful muscles rippling beneath its golden fur, was a massive lion. The beast's eyes glowed in the dim light, its breath slow and steady, as if it had been waiting for them. For a moment, no one moved. Then, as if sensing their presence, the lion let out a deafening roar and charged. Chaos erupted. The hunters fought bravely, but the lion was unlike any they had ever encountered. It was stronger, faster, more ruthless. Its claws slashed through their defenses with terrifying ease. In the end, only one hunter managed to escape, stumbling back to the village, his face pale with fear. When he arrived, the villagers gathered around, their eyes wide with terror as he told them what had happened. The news spread like wildfire, sending shockwaves through the community. People whispered anxiously among themselves, asking the same question over and over again. Why now? Why has this happened to us? Some believed it was just a terrible misfortune, but others, especially the elders, knew better. They remembered the warning, the prophecy that had been spoken long before the twins were born. And as the realization settled over them like a heavy storm cloud, one thought grew in their minds, chilling them to the bone. Something had changed the balance, and they feared that Chuka's choice had awakened something far worse than any of them could have imagined. Fear gripped the village like a suffocating fog. The death of the hunter had shaken everyone to their core, but the real terror set in when the lion struck again. Days after the first attack, another man went missing, then another. Soon, people were too afraid to leave their homes after sunset, and those who had to venture into the fields or the forest did so in groups, armed with whatever weapons they could find. The once peaceful village had been plunged into chaos. It wasn't long before the villagers gathered at the palace, demanding answers from their king. They crowded the royal courtyard, their faces tight with worry, their voices raised in desperation. "Your Majesty, we cannot live like this," one man cried out. "The lion is hunting us one by one." "Have we angered the gods?" a woman sobbed. "What have we done to deserve this?" The king stood before them, his expression solemn. He had heard the cries of his people, felt their fear and suffering, and knew something had to be done. "Enough is enough," he finally declared, his deep voice echoing through the courtyard. "We cannot allow this beast to rule our land. It must be slain before more lives are lost." Murmurs rippled through the crowd as they hung onto his words, waiting for his next decree. "I will offer a great reward to the one who brings me the head of this lion," the king continued. "To the victor, I will grant half of the village's lands, and more than that, he will have the honor of marrying one of my daughters." The announcement sent a shockwave through the crowd. Eyes widened. Excitement sparked in the air like a flame catching dry wood. Men who had once trembled at the thought of facing the lion now stood straighter, their minds racing with the possibilities. Half the village's land? The chance to marry into the royal family? The king's challenge had turned fear into ambition. Suddenly, young warriors, seasoned hunters, and even reckless dreamers all saw themselves as potential champions. "I will bring you the lion's head, Your Majesty," one man shouted. "As will I," another declared, his voice filled with determination. One by one, they pledged their bravery, eager to claim the prize and the glory that came with it. But not everyone in the crowd felt excitement. In the back, watching as the villagers roared with newfound courage, stood Rafat and Amandi. Their hearts pounded with unease, for they knew what this challenge truly meant. And they feared that sooner or later, the lion's fate would become their son's. The village was buzzing with excitement. The king's challenge had awakened something in the hearts of the people: courage, ambition, and for some, desperation. Warriors and hunters sharpened their weapons, strategizing about how they would bring down the monstrous lion. Groups of young men formed alliances, preparing for the dangerous hunt that could change their fate forever. But in one small hut on the edge of the village, the mood was much different. Obi sat across from his parents, his expression calm but determined. "I have made my decision," he said firmly. "I will hunt the lion." Rafat's breath caught in her throat. "No," she whispered, shaking her head as fear gripped her heart. "No, my son. You cannot go. You heard what the hunter said. The lion is no ordinary beast. It has taken the strongest of men. I will not lose you to the same fate." Amandi placed a hand on Obi's shoulder, his face lined with worry. "Listen to your mother," he urged. "You are still so young. There will be other battles to fight, other ways to protect the village. This is not your fight." But Obi only shook his head. "It is," he insisted. "This village is my home. These people are my family. I cannot stand by and watch them live in fear when I have the power to stop it." Chuka, who'd been listening silently, suddenly scoffed. "And you think you're the only one who can?" he muttered, his arms crossed. "The great Obi, the hero of the village, the one who's destined for greatness. What if you fail? What if you're not as strong as everyone believes?" Obi turned to him, meeting his brother's gaze. There was something in Chuka's voice: resentment, doubt. But Obi didn't let it shake him. "I don't care about the reward," he said. "I don't want the land or the king's daughter. I just want our people to be safe." But Rafat wasn't ready to let him go. "Please, my son," she pleaded, her voice thick with emotion. "For years, I prayed for you. I begged the gods for a child, and they blessed me with you and your brother. I cannot bear the thought of losing you now." Obi's expression softened. He reached for his mother's hands and held them gently. "I promise," he said quietly. "I won't go against your wishes. I will stay." Relief washed over Rafat and Amandi, and for a moment, everything seemed safe again. But later that night, as the village slept, Obi lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Something inside him wouldn't let him rest. The lion was still out there. And deep in his heart, he knew he couldn't ignore the call of destiny forever. The village lay in silence, bathed in the silver glow of the moon. While everyone slept soundly, Obi remained awake, his heart restless. He had promised his parents he would not go, but deep inside he knew he couldn't keep that promise. He could not sit idly by while fear ruled his people's lives. Moving carefully, he slipped out of bed and crept toward Chuka, who lay turned away, his breath slow and steady. Obi reached out and gently shook his brother's shoulder. "Wake up," he whispered. Chuka groaned and rolled over, his eyes flickering open. "What do you want?" he muttered, still half asleep. "I'm going," Obi said simply. "I need you to cover for me. Don't tell mother and father." Chuka sat up, his expression unreadable in the dim light. "You're actually going?" he asked, though his voice lacked concern. Obi nodded. "I have to." For a moment, there was silence between them. Then a slow smirk crept across Chuka's face. "Then go," he said, his tone strangely light. "Good luck, brother." Obi dressed quickly, strapping on armor and taking up his sword. He moved like a warrior on a mission, stepping out into the night without hesitation. Behind him, Chuka watched. But instead of worry or fear, his eyes gleamed with something else, something darker. As Obi disappeared into the shadows, Chuka whispered under his breath, "Let's see if you come back at all." For years, Chuka had lived in his brother's shadow, watching as Obi received the love, the praise, and the admiration that he himself had longed for. And now with Obi gone, perhaps, just perhaps, things would finally change. But fate has a way of playing cruel tricks on those who let jealousy take root in their hearts. What Chuka failed to see was that greatness is not measured by the attention one receives, but by the choices one makes. Obi's courage wasn't about proving himself or seeking approval. It was about protecting the people he loved, about doing what was right, even when it was dangerous. And that is a lesson that stretches far beyond the borders of their village. In the real world, We often face our own versions of Obi and Chuka times when we feel overshadowed, when jealousy whispers in our ears, telling us we deserve more, that someone else's success is stealing our own. But true strength isn't found in resentment, it's found in purpose. It's in lifting others up instead of tearing them down, and realizing that everyone has their own path to walk. The lion in this story may be real, but the greater battle is the one within the fight against envy, against selfishness, against the fear that we are not enough. And in the end, the ones who rise are those who choose courage over jealousy, purpose over pride,